Archaeologists are constantly making new discoveries and uncovering long-lost artifacts from the distant past. They've uncovered lost tombs, hidden cities, fully intact fossils, troves of treasure, and much more. Join me for today's video. We're going to take a look at 15 of the most incredible dig site discoveries. Number 15. Tollund Man. Peat bogs. They're pretty nasty places, as they're essentially wetlands filled with dead plant material. However, what's cool about these bogs is that they're great at preserving bodies. And on May 8th of 1950, two peat cutters from Denmark received the shock of a lifetime when they found the corpse of a man within a bog near the town of Silkeborg. The body was in such good shape that it was first thought to be the corpse of a recent murder victim, but upon further inspection it was found that the Tollund Man had died there sometime between 375 and 210 BC. Given that the body was more than 2,000 years old, it was in pretty incredible shape, as its hair, skin, and facial expressions were almost entirely intact. And to date, most scholars believe that the Tollund Man was either a human sacrifice or a hanged criminal. Yet no matter what the reason, the Tollund Man was undoubtedly a pretty cool discovery. Number 14. Omo 1. While there have been some pretty incredible archaeological discoveries in recent years, the discovery of the world's oldest human bones happened over 50 years ago. You see, back in 1967, a human skull was found under old volcanic ash in Ethiopia's Omo River Valley. While initial estimates indicated that the skull was 195 million years old, a recent study in 2008 that compared a chemical analysis on the pumice found at the volcano to the ash layer in the sediment above where the fossils were found determined that the skull was about 233,000 years old. This discovery was pretty incredible because it helped researchers determine that 233,000 years of age was the minimum age for Homo sapiens to settle in East Africa, thus allowing more accurate maps of human migration to be built. However, work is still being done to find the absolute earliest time that Homo sapiens could have migrated to the region, although this will likely be a far more difficult task that may require an interdisciplinary approach. Number 13. The dinosaur mummy. Generally speaking, when paleontologists find a dinosaur, all that remains is a bare-bone skeleton. However, in September of 2022, the discovery of a lifetime was made at a dig site in Drumheller, Alberta, Canada. Known as a dino mummy, the dinosaur in question was a rare juvenile hadrosaur, and it's so perfectly preserved that researchers could make out individual scales, tendons, and skin. And if those researchers are lucky, there's a chance that the dinosaur's internal organs may still be present as well. Brian Pickles, who's a paleontologist and ecology professor at the University of Reading, believes that the dinosaur is as well preserved as it is because it either died and then immediately got covered over by sand and silt in a river, or was killed because a riverbank fell onto it. In either case, the dino is a super cool remnant of the past and will likely help scientists learn a lot more about hadrosaurs. Number 12. A mummified dinosaur. When dinos are found underground, there's usually little more than bones left. But on March 21st of 2011, a heavy equipment operator at the Millennium Mine in Alberta, Canada, made the discovery of a lifetime when he found a massive dinosaur known as a nodosaur while drilling. You see, while this operator had found his fair share of fossilized wood in the past, this skeleton was nothing like they'd ever seen before. He's an incredible 5.5 meters in length and 1,130 kilograms in weight. It was absolutely massive. However, the real kicker here was that unlike most dinosaurs, its body was almost completely intact, and this still had its scales in place despite being about 110 million years old. According to researchers, this is likely due to the fact that the dinosaur had a rapid undersea burial, and the minerals from the water replaced the dinosaur's soft tissue before they rotted away. However, the same researchers noted that the chances of this happening are about as rare as if you were to win the lottery, making this find truly incredible and making this nodosaur one of the most well-preserved dinos in the world. Number 11. Tomb of Seti I. While the tomb of King Tut is the most famous ancient Egyptian discovery, the tomb of Seti I is believed by many to be far more beautiful. Discovered by Italian explorer Giovanni Battista Belzoni on October 16th of 1817, the 11-room chamber is rather impressive. Descending for 88 meters from the entrance to the burial chamber, the tomb consists of 11 rooms and is the longest and perhaps most decorative in the entire Valley of the Kings area. Complete with walls that depict Egyptian funerary texts and a super long 175-meter tunnel that supposedly connected Seti I to the afterlife down below. The tomb is filled with symbolism, and since its walls depict sacred stories, they've allowed Egyptologists to learn a lot about Egyptian religious beliefs. The existence of the tunnel is also quite interesting because while the sarcophagus was found empty and the coffin in the 175-meter-long tunnel, the body was located outside the tomb in an area known as the Royal Mummy Cache. Most archaeologists believe it was moved here sometime in antiquity for safekeeping, and the end result is a tomb that, while missing its mummy, is still super fascinating. Number 10. The Hoxne Hoard. Back in ancient times, wealthy Roman citizens would often hoard coins in order to safeguard the bronze, silver, and gold they contain. However, some hoards have simply remained in the ground, and every once in a while, a lucky metal detectorist might find some incredible coins hidden in the depths of their property. One such person was a certain Eric Laws. You see, back in 1992, a farmer by the name of Peter Watling lost a hammer, and he asked his friend Eric Laws, who was a retired gardener and amateur metal detectorist, to help look for it. While searching the field with his metal detector, Laws discovered some silver spoons, gold jewelry, and numerous gold and silver coins. And after retrieving a few of them, the pair notified the landowners and the police. The ensuing excavation went on to discover 14,865 Roman gold, silver, and bronze coins, and approximately 200 items of silver tableware and gold jewelry, which when combined were valued at an insanely high £1.7 million, which in 2022 currency is equivalent to nearly $4.4 million. This sum was promptly paid to the landowners by the British Museum and its donors, and many of the items found in the hoard are still on display in public institutions. Number 9. Pompeii. Of all the ancient Roman settlements out there, few are as incredible as Pompeii. It's often called the Vegas of the ancient world. Pompeii was known to be a playhouse filled with everything from live entertainment to brothels. And while it was wild in its day, in 79 AD the city was completely put on pause. That's because it was in this year that Mount Vesuvius erupted, completely covering the city in ash and immediately killing, yet perfectly preserving all of the people, animals, and products inside of it. The city would go on to remain under a heap of ash for centuries, until in 1594 a certain Count Muzio Tuttavilla commissioned reclamation works on the Sarno River Valley with the aim of digging a canal. However, during the excavations, some buildings with decorated walls were found, and in 1748 further excavations under the reign of Charles of Bourbon found even more structures. From that point forward, excavation has continued almost non-stop, and the end result has been the unearthing of a Roman city in almost perfect condition. Given how incredible this find was, each year tourists flock to visit the ruins of both Pompeii and the neighboring and similarly fated Herculaneum, where they walk the streets and feel what it was like to be an ancient Roman. Number 8. The Terracotta Army. When we think of underground armies, something like a war cemetery may come to mind. However, the Terracotta Army of the Chinese Emperor Qin Shi Huang turns this assumption on its head. First found on March 29th of 1974 by a group of local farmers as they were digging a well. The first thing to be discovered was a few terracotta pieces, and further digging soon uncovered the roof of a structure. This structure ended up having a massive terracotta army inside of it, consisting of statues of approximately 8,000 soldiers, 130 chariots, and 520 horses. All of this was contained in a massive 6.3 square kilometer mausoleum, and the idea behind each of these 222-kilogram soldiers is that they would protect the deceased emperor in the afterlife. Due to them being styled after Chinese soldiers of the era, they have revealed a lot about how Chinese troops looked at the time. And in an interesting twist, all of the statues in the part of the tomb that's been excavated have all been found to be unique, with each having its own facial features, hairstyle, clothing, and pose. However, the crazy thing about this mausoleum is that much of it remains untouched, and the Chinese government has stated it will remain this way until they can find a way to excavate it without causing any more damage. Number 7. The Ridgeway Hill Viking Burial Pit. Of all the entries on this list, one of the most curious is that of the Ridgeway Hill Viking Burial Pit. You see, in September of 2008, archaeologists from Oxford Archaeology began excavating land along the route of the planned Weymouth Relief Road, which was a roadway meant to help support the traffic for the upcoming 2012 Summer Olympic Games. However, during the excavations, they began surveying Ridgeway Hill, and while doing so, they happened to discover a burial pit with 54 skeletons inside. Now, the curious thing about this pit is that all of the heads of the victims within it were severed, and after further testing, it was determined that the bodies had been buried sometime between 970 and 1025 AD and consist entirely of males, with almost all of them being from their late teens to around 25 years old. In terms of geographic origin, all of the men appear to have originated from Scandinavia, with some having injuries that would have made it impossible for them to have died fighting, while others had wounds that made it seem like they struggled when they died. However, since the dead men were all of fighting age and were killed a long way from home, most theorize that the pit was the result of a conflict between native Saxons and invading Vikings. However, to this day, nobody's entirely sure. Number 6. Troy. If you're familiar with Greek mythology, then you probably know the story of the Trojan horse. For those of you who are unaware, the legend goes that after Greek soldiers had unsuccessfully besieged Troy for 10 years, they departed from the city and left a massive wooden horse that was supposedly a sacrifice to the goddess Athena. The citizens of Troy took this horse within their gates, yet unbeknownst to them, this wooden horse was filled with Greek soldiers. During the night, they exited the horse and invaded the city, destroying everything in their path and ultimately capturing Troy. Now, while most historians believe that this story was entirely fictional, in 1870, a rich German archaeologist by the name of Heinrich Schliemann became convinced that the works of Homer could help him discover the site of the ancient city of Troy. Fueling this research with his immense wealth, he landed in Turkey and began to dig, and against all odds, found the ruins of a series of ancient cities dating from the Bronze Age to the Roman period. In other words, he found several Troys, each built on the ruins of the last. And while it's doubtful that this city ever let in a giant wooden horse, what he found is nonetheless a pretty cool archaeological site, and to this day it continues to interest scholars and tourists alike. Number 5. The Brno Ossuary. While most catacombs are well-known burial sites, there are some that have been lost to history. And one super creepy one that was recently discovered is the Brno Ossuary. Rediscovered thanks to a land survey in 2001, this ossuary, which is located in the city of Brno in the Czech Republic, holds the remains of over 50,000 people. After some historical digging, it was discovered that the ossuary worked via an interesting cemetery rental plot system. You see, while there was a cemetery at the nearby church of St. James, it was far too small to fit all of the bodies that needed to be buried, and so in order to make sure everyone got a turn, the decision was made to bury bodies in the cemetery for a term of between 10 to 12 years, before digging up the bodies and sending them to the Brno Ossuary in order to make room for new arrivals. It was here that the bones were interred without any name or title attached, and the end result has been an underground cemetery where skeletons are stacked on top of one another and bones are put into slots, creating some very creepy rooms in the process. So, as long as you're not easily frightened, you too can visit this underground ossuary on a trip through Brno. Yet, given how creepy it is, I think I'd understand if you'd prefer to stay far away. Number 4. The Staffordshire Hoard. The early medieval period was a very fascinating time in British history, and one of the best repositories of its artifacts are contained within the Staffordshire Hoard. You see, on July 5th of 2009, a metal detectorist by the name of Terry Herbert was searching an area of recently plowed farmland when his detector went off. Over the next 5 days, 244 gold objects were recovered from the soil, and soon a much larger excavation effort unearthed over 3,500 pieces. Mostly consisting of silver and gold artifacts, they ranged in shape and size and consisted of things such as rings, sword pommels, and coins, with experts generally believing that they were put into the ground sometime between the years 650 and 675. Interestingly enough, none of the artifacts seem to have been made to be worn or used by women and appear to be the gear, equipment, and trappings of an elite male warrior who was a member of the aristocracy. According to experts, this suggests that the hoard consists of objects that were carefully selected before their burial, and given the fact that powerful objects like swords were singled out for special treatment, it seems like the Staffordshire Hoard may have been buried for a very specific purpose. Yet exactly what that purpose was is still unclear. However, what is clear is that at a purchase price of about $5 million, the Staffordshire Hoard is worth a boatload of money. Number 3. The Sandby Borg Massacre. Sandby Borg is the home of a Swedish ring fort that dates back to around the year 400, and while this makes it historically significant in and of itself, in 2011 it was discovered to be the site of a massacre. You see, in the spring of 2010, geophysical surveys were carried out in the area as part of a PhD project, and while these surveys were being carried out, suspected looting pits were discovered. As a result, local authorities subjected the entire site to a metal detector survey, and this revealed 5 magnificent jewelry caches containing large gilded silver brooches, finger rings, beads, and bells, with all of these being discovered in a variety of different houses. Yet while these discoveries were quite glamorous, things soon took a macabre turn when human remains were discovered. Rather curiously, none of them seemed to have been buried, as the skeletons were found strung out within their homes. While the dead ranged from being infants to the elderly, all of them appeared to be males. Yet despite this, it appears none of the victims attempted to defend themselves. Historians now believe that the area was site of a massacre, where some sort of invading army killed all the males and shipped the females off to a different location, perhaps to be sold as slaves or otherwise taken prisoner. And while the state of the site allows us to get keen insights into everyday life at the Ring Fort and into the nature of violence, the exact reasons as to why the Sandbyborg massacre occurred are still unclear. Number 2. King Tut's Tomb. When it comes to Egyptian pharaohs, few are quite as famous as the legendary King Tut. You see, back in 1891, a man by the name of Howard Carter arrived in Egypt. By the time of his arrival, most of the tombs of the Egyptian pharaohs had been found, although one remained elusive, the tomb of King Tut. After the end of World War II, Carter made it his mission to find the tomb, and on November 4th of 1922, he found the steps to the burial room hidden in the debris near the entrance of the nearby tomb of King Ramses VI. A few weeks later, Carter and a fellow archaeologist, Lord Carnarvon, ventured inside, and what they found was nothing short of incredible. Contained within the space was a 4-room tomb that over the years would be found to be home to several thousand objects, the most famous of which was the sarcophagus of King Tut, which was more than 3,000 years old and made of solid gold. And while the discovery only gave limited evidence surrounding the story of King Tutankhamun's reign, it nonetheless provided insight into the material culture of wealthy ancient Egyptians, and to this day many of the artifacts can be seen on public display. I should also note that there's widespread speculation that King Tut's tomb is cursed. More specifically, after finding the tomb, many people connected to the discovery died of strange and unusual causes, creating speculation that a curse had been put over the tomb. However, still to this day, this claim is still purely speculative. Number 1. Sioux. Now, generally speaking, archaeologists digging for dinos won't find a complete skeleton. After all, be it disintegration via wind and water erosion or being consumed by various creatures, most dinosaur carcasses are missing a few pieces. However, Sioux stands apart for being an almost entirely intact specimen of the legendary Tyrannosaurus rex. First discovered on August 12 of 1990 by American marine archaeologist and paleontologist Susan Hendrickson and paleontologist Peter Larson on a cattle ranch located in South Dakota's Cheyenne River Sioux Reservation. An excavation discovered that the skeleton was 90% intact, yet almost immediately after its discovery, an intense legal battle ensued. The Black Hills Institute, which was the group that Hendrickson and Larson were part of, had obtained permission from the owner of the land, Maurice Williams, to excavate and remove the skeleton, and had paid Williams $5,000 in return. However, once the skeleton was discovered, Williams claimed that the money had not been for the sale of the fossil, and that he had instead only allowed Larson to remove and clean the fossil for a later sale, and this claim was backed up by the Sioux tribe he was part of. To make matters even more complicated, the property where the fossil had been found was held in trust by the United States Department of the Interior, and this resulted in a very complex situation. However, the ultimate decision was that because the land was U.S. federal property, the Black Hills Institute had acted illegally by digging there, and went on to charge many of its members for both the Sioux discovery and a host of other illegal digging operations. However, despite the fact that the T-Rex was in the hands of the feds, it was decided that the bones belonged to the landowner Maurice Williams, who was allowed to sell them so long as he got federal permission first. He would go on to do just that, and in a 1997 auction at Chicago's Field Museum, they paid a hammer price of $7.6 million. It's thanks to the fact that this public institution bought the fossilized skeleton that Sioux now stands permanently on display within Field Museum and is available for all to enjoy.
Watch our binge-watching playlist if you'd like to watch all of our most popular top 15 videos. Grab a drink, grab a snack, and get ready to binge.